and welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Joanne Smith.
I'm Ken Cavanaugh. A roundup of news and background developments these past few weeks.
A multi-million-dollar discrimination award in the U.S., a case started by an epilepsy attack 4 years ago.
And in another American court ruling in New York State, a court has said that Delta Airlines can't dismiss flight attendants because of obesity.
We'll feature an interview with the just-retired Chief of Canada's Human Rights Commission, Max Yeldon.
The just-appointed Lieutenant General of Quebec, Lise Thibault, and the controversy surrounding her new job.
And now, here's this week's roundup of disability stories.
The former director of the Quebec Office for Persons with Disabilities is now that province's lieutenant governor, all done in the traditional manner, but not without controversy. Lise Thibault's quiet home in the Lower Laurentians in Quebec was anything but quiet last month. Journalists lined up for interviews following her appointment to Quebec's highest political position. And Thibault's appointment was also marked by a call from Quebec Premier Lucien Bouchard.
He offers me his collaboration as I offer my collaboration to Mr. Bouchard. And we will have to work together.
Bouchard approved of the federal government's choice for the position, but he has also said he wants the post abolished. If there has to be a lieutenant governor, says Bouchard, Quebec's National Assembly should help make the choice. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien has flatly turned down that proposal.
He told me that this was not constitutional, that he had the prerogative, that he would use it, he would not give it up, and that that was his duty as Prime Minister of Canada.
I, Jean-Louis Roux.
Thibault replaces Jean-Louis Roux, who resigned last month after admitting to flirting with Nazism as a young man in the 1940s. And Thibault says her own past came up when she was first approached with the job offer.
They only ask me with a smile, do you think you have something you have done when you were 19 or something like this? And I'm sure that will be the question, and I will have to live with. That's all.
Quebec Liberal leader Daniel Johnson also approved of Thibault's choice. He has also not ruled out the idea of the provincial government having a say in the appointment of the lieutenant governor, but he says such a move should not be taken lightly. Thibault was at one time a well-known television host. She ran for the Liberal Party twice in the 1980s, once on the federal level and once in Quebec. She lost both times. More recently, she ran the Quebec Office for Persons with Disabilities. In the United States, in a Michigan case involving discrimination because of epilepsy, the federal court in Detroit has handed down a $5.5 million award to Thomas Lewis, agreeing with his claim that after having been forced to resign his position as a truck driver because of an attack of epilepsy, he was denied a less dangerous position with the automobile delivery company Commercial Carriers. The company cited federal transportation regulations in dismissing Mr. Lewis from his driver's job after an epileptic attack at his home in 1989. But the company declined to offer him another, safer job, and the court said it was always coming up with some new reason to disqualify him. The lawsuit was mounted by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the award, which the company says it will appeal, is the largest amount ever granted under the Americans with Disabilities Act. In another interesting legal move, a New York court has ruled that obesity is a disability, and as such it cannot be used as a reason for denying a person a job. However, the ruling in a lawsuit brought against Delta Airlines by 10 of its flight attendants was a little involved. The fine points are obesity is a disability, but the court said the airline had not been guilty of discrimination because on their part, the flight attendants did not show that they were medically incapable of losing weight. Well, we couldn't let the holiday season pass without telling you at least one story with a festive feel. Mike Chisholm of Newfoundland reports on one man's unique celebration of the season. It's a question of disabilities not necessarily meaning limitations.
It's Saturday morning. For novice diver Carl Boone, a perfect time to pack his diving bag and head for the open water.
First thing I put in mine is a spare pair of arms and a spare leg. And the rest of it, I think, is pretty well standard gear, I think.
Standard gear, yes. But standard is hardly a word used to describe Carl Boone.
Let's go.
33 years ago, a problem during pregnancy cut off his blood flow. He lost both hands and a foot. Since then, he's used an artificial leg and hooks for hands.
Pretty used to them now. I've had them all my life. I had the first pair of arms when I was First pair of arms when I was 18 months old, and first leg when I was 9 months old.
His disability hasn't slowed him down. He hunts, fishes, and snowmobiles. And 3 months ago, he decided to try underwater diving, something he's wanted to do all his life.
As to my ability of being able to do it personally, I never really give it a second thought.
When Carl walked in my shop one day, he sort of threw me off guard, saying, okay, can I do this? And after checking with the agency, seeing if he could meet the standards, he did, and he's certified as a level 1 sport diver.
I did it mostly, I suppose, for the fun of it. I guess it's a little bit of a challenge too, being disabled, but mostly for the fun of it.
Now remember, when we all get down to 35 feet, we're all going to start singing Christmas carols.
This time of the year, I think we're a bit nuts to be doing it, but I got an excuse. I was born with my disability. I don't know what happened to the rest of the guys.
For Carl, there are no special modifications to his gear or special instructions while underwater. Out here, he's the same as everyone else.
When you get out there, there's no doors to open. There's no curbs to maneuver. There's no stairs to climb.
And what's a Christmas party underwater without a visit from the man from the North Pole? 20 minutes later, the party's over, and it's time to head for dry land.
Carl, how was your first Christmas underwater?
Not bad, I suppose. A little chilly, but not bad.
Was Santa good to you?
Oh, yeah, I got a rig cutter, line cutter.
I got screwdrivers.
Yeah, they're going to rust.
Good time. Merry Christmas, Carl.
Thanks, buddy.
Mike Chisholm, CBC News, Phillips Head.
That's our roundup. Later in the show, we'll take a look at the artistic process.
And in a moment, we'll hear some thoughts from the retiring Chief Commissioner of Human Rights, Max Yalden.
It's a slow war of attrition, but we'll win.
This program is brought to you in part by Royal Bank Financial Group, bringing you alternative format publications. One customer at a time. Call 1-800-ROYAL-97.
As of the end of 1996, the well-known public servant Max Yalden is no longer the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
After beginning his career in the diplomatic service, Mr. Yalden has, over the past few years, become a familiar voice in the human rights field in Canada, quite often critical of the role of the federal government. His 1995 report, for instance, charged that the federal government was not carrying its fair share of leadership in the area of equality rights for people with disabilities. Bill McQueen caught up with Mr. Yalden on his last day of work with the Commission.
I finished my PhD in 1956, and I had a job at Harvard, a very good thing, I may say, and we'd send all our books to all our possessions, which were mostly books, my wife and I, to Cambridge, and I'd gone up to Toronto to get a visa, because you had to leave the country to get a visa. And while I was there, I had an offer from External Affairs, and I figured I'd been in school. I was 26, so I'd been in school all my life, and maybe I should go and see what something outside academia was like, so I did. And in the end, my wife turned out to be the university professor. So.
For more than 40 years, Max Yalden has held important posts with the Government of Canada. He was Canada's ambassador to the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War, and Canada's language commissioner. Until the end of December, he was the Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, a position he held for over 9 years.
I think that always apart from the Aboriginal people, which are a very special category in this country, that disabled people tend to be the forgotten ones. That I've often said this: if you pay your taxes and make a donation once a year to the United Way, you figure somebody else is looking after this business of disabled people, and of course they're not. And we're not making the kind of effort we should be making to fully to integrate the disabled into what we like to call mainstream society. Governments, plural, know that something ought to be done. They know that not only is there some kind of moral imperative, there's an economic imperative.
Yeldon said that it was an enormous waste of talent and money for people with disabilities to be left outside the workforce. He said that should change. He thought the new employment equity legislation, passed last October, could offer new avenues for disabled people.
Well, in the first place, that's a much better act than the previous one that was passed 10 years ago. It's better in that the responsibilities that it lays on employers are clearer. It applies to the public service as well as the private sector. It gives this commission a far clearer mandate as to its authority in terms of monitoring and indeed in the end requiring institutions and companies and others to hire more representatives of the so-called target groups, one of which is the disabled people. It's true that employers and others tend to exaggerate the cost of accommodating disabled people, of adjusting the workplace. The figures that I've always seen suggest that much of what needs to be done can be done for a very small investment. If you can't have meaningful employment, if you can't, for a whole lifetime, contribute something in a material way, because material contribution means a lot in North American society. If you can't do any of that, then you certainly are living on the margins.
Yeldon said the commission could help change that.
Apart from taking complaints, I think our contribution has to be in terms of pushing governments and pushing the private sector and pushing everybody else we can find to push to change their attitude to disabled people, to recognize, furthermore, that they have a real responsibility in this matter.
What's ahead in the 21st century for people with disabilities?
The biggest responsibility and new responsibility for the Commission as we move to the 21st century is employment equity, and to use that piece of legislation and to really develop a situation in which disabled people participate fully in the workforce, have a job, a real job. And if we can do it together in a coordinated way so that the battalions are properly drawn up and ready to join in the battle, because it is a battle. Nothing comes for free. We'll succeed in pushing these people. But it won't be easy. And it won't be a blitzkrieg. It's a slow war of attrition, but we'll win. You'll see.
But although Max Yeldon believes he'll have to make some adjustments after a more than 40-year career in the government, he wasn't quite ready to withdraw from public life.
I think I've been very fortunate to have been elected or to have been the person elected when Canada was elected to the United Nations Human Rights Committee, and that will give me something to focus on, and I think that's a good thing. Personally, I mean, in terms of someone who's been working for a long time.
Canada's new Chief Commissioner of Human Rights, Michelle Felideau-Ramsey, will assume her responsibilities this month. One of our continuing major interests, of course, will be the new employment equity legislation, and we'll be keeping you posted.
When we come back, color, shadow, darkness, and light. What makes an artist tick?
This is the Disability Network.
How does an artist get from a blank canvas to a finished work of art? What are the steps? Are there any steps to speak of? What's the outcome? Next, we'll look at the process and the products of a creative mind. Toronto artist Menno Krant has been painting seriously for only a short amount of time. He's so new at it, his creative process is still a mystery, even to him.
Well, I think a few years ago, I just, for some reason, had this strong urge to go out and get a canvas and try and figure out how to paint. I'm not quite sure why, but I think, you know, there are a lot of things going on. Maybe it was just a way of finding something else to do. But I went out and started to paint. From that minute on, I've been painting every day.
He says the process of starting a painting has gotten easier than it was even a short while ago.
When I decide what I'm painting, it's sort of instantaneous. I try to look for what's already there, what comes out as you put a stroke across the canvas. If I use a blue or a black, and how it changes everything, it sort of moves around a little bit like a puzzle. And the darkness and lightness makes things move, and either trying to remove that or add to it.
Painting in the studio is one thing, but Menno sometimes uses different locales to produce just the right creative atmosphere.
One of the reasons I started going to the beach to paint was, first of all, it was something to do with the beach. I would go there and paint and use the water from the lake to mix watercolors and other things because you wouldn't have water with you. So I started using the sun and the water, and the quietness is there. When I'm working in a car, what's nice about the car is that you're completely enclosed and private. You can, you know, do whatever you like. You can relax and just paint. But I find it really nice and peaceful. I find it secure. At first, when I started to do this, at first I was a little paranoid, thinking, you know, I was going to get mugged or something because you're sitting in the car. And it's become much easier, I think. I find it quite easy.
Menno is currently exhibiting at the Art Gallery of Ontario at the Art of Darkness show. It's a collection of works from artists who have experienced depression or manic depression.
I think when I first went to the first part of this Art of Darkness show, it's the first time I had actually met people that had worse problems than I did, or similar problems than I did. And that, I think, made me realize that people look at your art a completely different way, that some people see it from a depressed point of view, or from whatever, I guess, that you experience as an emotion. It could be a negative emotion or a positive emotion. I've had people since this show think they're bright and colorful, which is opposite to what I was always told. I think my paintings sort of let people know that there's a lot more to what they see in the image than what they think.
Menno's work is beginning to get noticed.
In the summer, I'm having a solo show at another gallery. And there's an art dealer in New York that's going to be showing my work at an international art show. And I'm going to try not to have too many other shows before that. I'm going to keep painting.
If you'd like to see more of Menno's work or more of the Art of Darkness exhibition, it continues at the Art Gallery of Ontario until early March.
When we come back, the ups and downs of international competition, Canadians try to make their mark in the sport of bocce.